Hey, what is going on, my man, Dave?
Joe, how the heck are you, sir?
I'm good. I'm good. I'm doing very well. Man, I'm just excited about being here again today. So we want to pass that excitement on to our viewers and listeners. And we want to thank
Absolutely.
you for tuning into another episode of the Journeys of Not So Ordinary People podcast. Me and Dave enjoy this thoroughly over and over, week after week. So thank you for tuning in. If this is your first time listening to the podcast or viewing the podcast, welcome. And for those who are returning, thanks for your support and coming back. So we are into the new year, and so we're looking at different topics that we want to cover this year. So they're not literally they're not
Oh,
just going to
they're
fall out
not
of the
looking
sky.
around.
Yeah. So for today, we touch on this. Just I don't know if we touched on it too much this past year, but the topic today is leading self and others, right? So, we think about leaders typically having that formal I'm sorry, whether it's manager, supervisor, director, VP, whatever it is. So we think in terms of leaders being someone with that specific title. But what if you could be a leader without having that title? And so that's what we're going to kind of cover today, leading yourself and others. So, with that, Dave, I'm sure you're ready to just jump right in and
Oh,
talk
I'm
about,
chomping at the bit. Just like,
being a leader yourself and, leading others. So,
yeah. So the first thing that comes to mind when I think about leading self and others is, of course, there are formalized leadership models out there. We're going to stay away from those because we really want to emphasize what it means to lead. And I want to start off with a little anecdote. Early in my career, I spent about a year as a retail manager for a large retail chain. And I remember when I was at my first store, I had one of the employees that worked for me said, "My job is to help make you the best store manager you can possibly be."
wow.
And I'm like, wow. And this person, she'd been with the company for like 15 years. She had no desire on promoting. She loved what she did. And she said, "My job is to make you the best manager you can be, Dave." And I
Wow.
thought that was a pretty powerful statement because
Right.
it shows a lot of self-awareness, and it shows a lot of, and it demonstrates that you do not have to be, to your point, in a leadership position or a functional leadership position to be a leader. We all know, we've all encountered individuals throughout our lives, personal and professional, that have just displayed very strong leadership skills and traits, and maybe they didn't even have a leadership title or position.
Right.
They're just
Yeah.
a normal person, the average Joe, to tap into what Joe, one of the phrases that Joe likes to use, just someone that we encountered that's just got their stuff together and just really
Right.
understands what leadership really means. And leadership is not about a title. That is one piece, again, the functional piece, but we want to delve into what leadership really is at its core. And we've made the distinction in the past, in passing, that there is a very fundamental difference between being a manager and a leader. A manager is technical
Right.
expertise, and leadership is about, really at its core, about inspiring others. And there's different way to inspire others. And
Right.
we talked about the difference between inspiration and motivation in the past podcast. So this is about what leadership really is, and that you don't have to be in a functional leadership position. You don't have to be a pastor at a church, or, to your point, director, VP. You don't have to have some big, powerful title or position to be a leader. We've actually seen and heard stories, especially with our military backgrounds, of individuals who've gone above and beyond,
Right.
sometimes sacrificing themselves, and come out with, and I'm going to use an example that's very common, and I'm not trying to, you know, present it in one way or another, but the Medal of Honor is a very notable and known recognition for the military. And a
Right.
lot of the folks that receive those honors, that honor, are not in leadership positions. They just went above and beyond, and we're not going to go into detail on what that means, but they went
Right.
above and beyond. So when we keep that in mind, anyone can, and I would argue, is a leadership under the right circumstances. And when I say right circumstances, I'm going to qualify that right to that individual. You know, it might be a teacher, it might be a
Right.
peer, it might be Joe has led me and I've led Joe in conversations, in dialogues, on and off the camera. So that's really what we want to understand and share is what does that mean? What are some examples of what it means to be a leader without having a title? Because when you have that title, there's a certain level of respect that is expected. And if we strip those titles away, now it's not based upon that title, it's based upon the
Right.
individual. And that's
Right.
that's really the the crux of what we want to capitalize on in this discussion is really focusing on the individual and what it means to be a leader and going above and beyond and helping others, because that's what a lot of leaders do. They help others find their potential, help leaders help other people find their potential, not meaning the leader, the people that they're
Right. Right.
inspiring, helping those
Absolutely.
individuals learn what they can really do, understand their limits, you know, helping them believe in themselves when the individual doesn't necessarily believe in themselves.
Right.
You know, and that's a very, very powerful tool to have in your toolbox, to understand that you do not have to be in a position or have a title to be a leader. Anyone can be a leader. And that's
Right.
been demonstrated throughout history, you know, in positive and negative regards, that leaders can be great leaders and still be tyrants, you know, or
Right.
they can
Right.
be, you know, just these, you know, really beautiful people and individuals that are out there that are like, wow, that is unbelievable. The things that this person was able to contribute. So that's my
Dave,
thoughts.
thanks for that because, we often think of our titles as, descriptive of who we are.
Right.
And that could be furthest from the truth sometimes. So I'm going to go ahead and admit that years ago, I thought, leadership was associated with a title. And,
Right.
and in fact, when I went back to school in 2005, that was one of the main reasons why I went back to school, so I could get in a position of authority, which was a
Right.
supervisor or manager position. But I,
And
I,
I like what you just said right there, a position of authority.
right. And it wasn't that I wanted to boss people around or I
Right.
wanted to, make them do it because I was the leader or the manager or supervisor, but it was more because I wanted to be involved in the decision making process. And,
Mhm.
and for me to do that, I had to be in a position of
Right.
authority, like a supervisor or manager position. So, admittedly, that's where my mindset was when I thought about leading people and making a difference for people and helping them discover all those things. But it wasn't, it was shortly after that that I realized it was not the title. It was not, that thought that I was that position of authority, but it was more by my actions,
Right.
what I was doing to help people, assist people, to help them move forward. And that's what I learned, was again going after that title was not shouldn't have been in my focus area, but
Mhm.
I did learn it pretty quickly that it went beyond just the title. It was how, people responded to you, how you could get people to do certain things, and not again that you were doing it in a sneaky or conniving way, but
Right.
you had the ability to do that. And it's funny because just last week I was facilitating, a class, and one gentleman asked me, when we were talking about leadership, he said, are leaders born or are they made?
Yeah, that's the
A-
trait leadership theory. Yeah.
Yep. And so I told him, that it could be a little bit of both.
Yeah.
It could be one or the other, but and we started going down the path of, types of leaderships and things like that. But, to your point, what you said earlier, it's not about the title or the position, but that example you brought up at the very beginning, by that employee saying, "Hey, I want you to be the best manager," that exudes leadership all the way up
Yeah.
and down every day.
Yeah.
And so that's kind of where we ended up on our discussion just this past week about, being in a position to help others, to influence others, but not having that specific title. So yeah, I'm sure a lot of people, many people, consider that title being the leadership, the
Yeah.
definition of leadership, when in most cases it's not, because you could be
Right.
a manager and you could be a supervisor and you could be an ineffective leader,
Yeah.
because again, you're
And
basing
then
your
therefore, if you're an ineffective leader, by definition, you're not a leader.
and absolutely, exactly, and so that's kind of where I was going, was that yeah, you just because you have the title does not mean you're going to be a leader, and I think that's where some of the confusion lies. Is people
Yeah.
think, I put them in a manager role or a supervisor role or quote, leadership role or position, that they're going to get people to do the job or do the work.
Right.
And mainly they're basing it on their past technical performance and
Right.
not their ability to lead people. And I think that's one
And
of the
and
biggest.
I'm glad you brought that up. I have another anecdote about that. I remember one an incident, and what, not negative, and just an occurrence or an experience, I should say. I was working for a company. I'd been there a while, and I'd completed my doctorate degree. And for those of you who are new to listening, Joe's background and my background in our at our doctoral level is in the realm of business and leadership. So um, that being said, I remember talking with an individual who was a manager, and they had just been promoted to, I believe it was a deputy director position. So they had that leadership quote, I'm using air quotes for our listeners, that
Right.
leadership title, having director in their title. And I was talking with them, and I said, and I asked the person, I said, "So do you have any leadership training? And if not, I'm happy to work with you, and share my knowledge on what leadership is." And the individual said, "No, I got this. I've been a senior manager for years, and I'm an expert in my field, and this and that." And I'm like, "Oh, okay. So because you were an expert in what you did technically, that
Right.
makes you
Yeah.
an expert in leadership." And the individual said, "Yes." And I said, "Okay, so would
Okay.
you agree that I'm an expert in leadership?" And they said, "Oh, absolutely. You've got, you've got your doctorate in it and this and that." And they provided a couple other examples. And I said, "Okay, so then I can look at your engineering stuff and make changes." And they said, "Whoa, wait a minute. What are you talking about?" And I said, "Well, you just said that technical expertise equals leadership. And if I have leadership, then I should have the technical expertise to look at your engineering stuff." And they said, "No, no, no, no." And then the light bulb went off, and they understood the point. And they said, "I understand now, and I am going to get into some leadership training," because
Okay.
technical expertise and leadership are two different
Absolutely.
realms. It's like
Yep.
marketing and sales. It's like teaching and, I don't know, managing, just two
Right.
completely different things. And so, that's an important example or of the perceptions that are out there. And really, when
Right.
we talk about leadership, to be a good and effective leader or a leader, um, leadership really starts with you as an individual. The
Right.
introspection, we brought this up many, many times in our discussions, that reflective journey within yourself to understand who you are as an individual. And part of that is understanding, are you a leader? And I would argue that in the right circumstances, everyone has the ability to be a leader. It just depends, and on a day-to-day basis, it might not be, yeah, I'm not a leader. But again, to go back into the military scenario, people that are not leaders can easily step up and become leaders. And that's an easy example to observe, especially if you're looking at documentaries. We hear about a
Well,
lot
you
of
know what,
documentaries that
Dave,
are
I'll,
out
I'll
there.
slightly challenge that,
Okay.
because in the military, yeah, I think you're potentially put in positions where you can become a leader. But I
Mhm.
think one of the major differences is that, in the military, they do a very good job of providing you leadership training.
They do.
And so and to some people it may not seem like much, but just having,
A little bit.
enough,
Mhm.
just enough to maybe apply that to a certain situation helps. But think about, if you're not in the military, think about if you're in an organization for 25 years, you've never um, had leadership training, so I
Yeah,
agree with you
and
to a point that,
it and
everybody has the ability to
and it was
lead.
it was and I was alluding to or inferring of a situational type leader. So and I'll give you an
Oh
example.
yeah, I can agree with. Yeah, I can see that.
So how many
Yes,
times have we seen, and this is kind of a dark example, but an incident on the side of the road where someone needs help.
right,
And I may not know much about anything, with my job, I'm not a leader at my job, let's say, but in that moment, I recognize that there is a need and I step up.
right.
That's why I say anyone has the potential to be a leader under the right
You're correct,
circumstances.
but I just didn't want to make that that everyone in the military. I mean, I think
There's the
going
potential. We'll qualify with the potential.
there's a potential, but like I
Yeah.
said, I think in some cases though, like I say, the military does
Yeah.
provide you with those leadership
Yeah, some basic leadership
skills.
skills. Yeah.
And again, not everybody's going to be accepting
Right.
of those or receiving of those, but just hearing it or seeing it is going to put some type of reference in your brain,
Right.
where
Right.
again someone else who has. But you're right, you're right. The example you talked about with the person on the side of the road, seeing a situation, they jump up and do it. And you're right, most of us have that ability to do that. We
Yeah.
do. It's just calling on it sometimes. It
Right.
may
Right.
be the challenge.
Yeah.
But yeah,
So
so I didn't just didn't want us to
yeah, and I
think that.
appreciate the clarification.
Yeah,
So kind of bringing it back in a little bit. So leadership really starts with the individual understanding themselves and what they bring to the table and how they can help develop others and inspire others. So once a person can do that, that is really the first step to becoming a leader and an effective leader.
right,
Because if you haven't taken the time to understand who you are as an individual, what you bring to help others without expecting anything in return, because that becomes kind of a quid pro quo situation. And then there's an ulterior motive, and that's
right,
a leadership
right,
style in and of itself that we're not going to discuss or go into detail. But understanding yourself and what you bring to help inspire and develop others without expecting anything in return, that's kind of one of the core elements of being a good and effective leader. It's not about promoting yourself. It's not about, hey, look what I've done. You just do it. It's one of those internal drivers of that individual that they just can't help wanting to help others for the sake of helping others and to share with others and to
right,
develop others, because that's what leaders do. And granted, now there are leaders that have been very, again, negative leaders, to put it
right,
kindly. And again, it's about perception, because the individuals that we're following, leaders that can be perceived as negative, to those individuals, that person is not a negative leader. So
right,
perception does
right.
play a big piece in what
Absolutely.
leadership is. It doesn't mean that they're not effective leaders. It's just that the driving energy or force can be positive or negative, and that again is very subjective. So well, I don't want us to go down that rabbit hole, but it's just to be aware that there are
Right,
different types of effective leaders. So um, that's really where it starts. Leadership starts with that introspection and understanding, what do I bring? What can I do to help others? And what does that look like to help others? And to our point, and we've already mentioned this, it is not based upon functional title. It is not based upon your position. It's really about understanding who you are as an individual. And there are some people that are like, yeah, I do not want that responsibility, because there is a burden of responsibility when you take on a
right,
leadership position, not, I didn't say title, I said position
right,
or situation, to step up and to, And I'm not saying take control. It's not about power control. It's about stepping up and inspiring others. That's really what it boils down to. So what
Dave,
are your thoughts on that?
well, you bring up a good point, and I think understanding what you bring to the table. To start with, you understanding your capabilities, your
Yeah.
strengths, the things you are very, very good at. But I think one of the challenges is the fact that if you don't have that title or you're not in a position of authority, what is the motivator for you to stand up and say, hey, I know how to do that, or hey, I can help with that situation. And I think in some cases, people, they all they want to do is aid A and B. They don't want
Mhm.
to do all the things above and beyond that,
Right.
even though they may be fully capable. And so I think when you're doing that reflection and understanding what you bring to the table, I think that's the challenge where people are going to
Yeah.
say, I know I can do that, but I don't want to do it, or
Right.
there's no gain for me to do that. And
Right.
so it goes back to that person, individual, what drives them, what motivates them, what
Mhm.
inspires them. And if some of that is in your DNA or, built into you,
Mhm.
you're going to respond immediately. But others who have those abilities, and even those people that you'll be like, man, you know how to do that, or you're
Mhm.
good at that, and you're almost expecting them to interject at some point if you're around them in a situation. But it's still choice.
Mhm.
If those individuals want to be that leader and step up and say, hey, I got this. So that's the challenge, I think, with, because you said it, most of us had that ability to be leaders. It's just,
Whether
how
we
do we
tap
tap
into it.
into
Yeah.
it?
Yeah.
Exactly. How do we bring it out to the
Yeah.
surface? How do we, and those are some of the things that I've learned over the years that, like I say, initially I was hung up on the titles, and even though my intent was not to just put my thumb on people and make them do what I wanted to do, but it was more about being I thought in a position where I could make change.
Mhm.
And I thought the easiest way to do that was to be the boss, to
Right.
be, that functional leader. But I've learned over the years, I've had so many more people come to me, and just because of who I am, that's why they believed me or they trusted me, they followed me, and what had nothing to do with my title. It
Right.
was more the motivation and the inspiration that I
Yeah.
provided that led them to look at me as a leader. And
Yeah.
so that's what I've learned, in
And
my
I,
journey.
and I'm glad you brought that up because again, it goes back to you don't have to have a title to lead. And you don't,
Right.
and leading is not just about inspiring and leading those that are below you
Right.
functionally or
Absolutely.
from a
Yeah.
perception. A good leader, someone who's effective at leading, can lead subordinates, they can lead equals, and they can lead other people or individuals that are in functional positions that are above them, sometimes
Absolutely.
way above
Yep.
them.
Yep.
And good leaders also are not deliberate about seeking out recognition for it. It's
Right.
sometimes
Right.
it's not that grand gesture, oh, and raising their hand, I'll lead this project. It's
Right.
not about that. It's about understanding yourself and then tapping into that, as we mentioned, and then tapping into other individuals to help
Right.
them understand their potential.
Right.
Helping other people realize that they can accomplish things that they didn't realize they could accomplish or thought that they could but didn't know how. And that's what leadership is really
And
about.
and that's the excitement, I think, for both of us. Even in doing this podcast, you mentioned, and I like to use that reference a lot, that helping them see the light bulb,
Yeah,
that aha moment for them.
right.
That's my greatest excitement is watching someone else, see their switch flick on,
Right.
and
Yep.
then from there they're going. Is
Yeah.
once we help them get that switch turned on, that's the achievement that they now have it for themselves. They can go ahead and
Yeah.
take off running.
And that's what we love about teaching. Joe and
Right.
I have taught college and still take on courses every now and then. And that's one of the things. And again, uh, it's absolutely true. People do not teach because it's extremely financially lucrative. It's
Right.
a
Right.
it's a labor of love. But when you're in the classroom, whether it's virtual or in person, and you see those aha moments, those light bulbs, that understanding click in that person's eyes, that's what it's about. That moment. And I don't care what class it is or
Right.
what workshop you're teaching. When you see those light bulbs go off in the individual's eyes, that's when you know you've made that connection and that they've made the connection. And
Right.
that's what leadership is about, is looking for those moments. And we do it all the time. And that's why, if you look at it, if you listen or view our previous podcasts, there's a lot of undertones in there where we talk about, you know, helping other people and being humble and paying attention and understanding yourself
Right.
and understanding others and situations and being appreciative for all the little moments. And those are some of the little moments. That individual may not come up to you afterwards and say, thank you so much for helping me understand the right way to do something. It's like sometimes they just walk away and you know that they've got it. And then weeks, months, or maybe even never, you know they're on the right path because you
Right.
saw it in their eyes or saw it in their behaviors or in their attitudes or in their exercises. And that's really the beauty of leadership. I mean, it's a truly unique and very special thing to be able to do and to understand what drives leadership and what leadership really is really a cool thing to observe. And I want to kind of switch gears for just a few moments as we kind of trail into towards the end of the discussion. And that is, some people think you have to be paid to be a leader, and that's not
Right.
true. There are many community leaders, there are many leaders in and around and among us, on a personal side and professional side that are not getting paid, that enjoy very much to be leaders. Look at the people that
Right.
volunteer for things,
Right.
look at the nonprofits and the not-for-profits. Those folks do not get paid as much as people that are in
They
for-profit
might in
industries.
industry. Right. Yeah.
So they
Exactly.
are doing it not because of the money. They're doing it because they love what they do and they love to help other people.
Right.
And when we start pulling that thread about volunteering, or just sharing advice, that's what leadership is. It's knowing that, and Joe and I have struggled with this a little bit early in our careers as consultants and coaches, and that is, you know, at some point you have to draw that line and say, hey, this person needs help, and maybe they can't afford the monetary aspect of it. But
Right.
as a good leader, that's really not what leadership is about. It's about helping people to understand what they're capable of and helping them and guiding them, not telling them, but
Right.
guiding
Right.
them in the direction to become better as individuals, as team players, as contributors, or even as leaders themselves.
Right.
So,
No, those are very good points. And you know, we've established this over and over again in our podcast. The fact that that is our intention is to provide those nuggets, and like you
mhm.
said, it's not about being paid, or if you are paid, being
Or
paid
being
those top dollars,
recognized,
or even recognized. It is about that feeling when you walk away that you just help someone else, achieve their goals. You help someone else realize their potential,
yeah.
and those are the things that good leaders want to be able to talk about and display and get excited about. So this whole misconception, and like I said, I bought into it as a younger person in my career, that I had to be in a leadership role or functional role to make a difference in people's lives. And like I said, I've learned over the years that that is not the case. It is still
Yeah.
really about you understanding your value, what you bring to the table, those influences you have, and then maximizing those to your full capability. And
Mm.
like Dave said, that's what we try to do with other people, help them realize those things as well. I just, I can't tell you how many um, connections I've made over the years, and the impact that I didn't know I was having on people.
Yeah.
Like you say, because not all the time they're going to come back and say, "Hey, you helped me do this," but just knowing. even with this podcast, that we're putting hopefully good vibes out there
Yeah.
and providing people with things that's going to assist them. That's a form of leadership. Me and
Yeah.
Dave don't get paid for this. That's not our expectation for this at all. We just want to, keep getting on this platform and
Yeah.
talking to you
Yeah.
and
Sharing
helping
sharing
you.
our knowledge. So
Absolutely.
one of our, I guess, one of our tags or mantras is helping you so you don't have to take the long, painful, scenic route like we
Absolutely.
did. So
Absolutely. So I think me and David mentioned it, that, part of it is that identifying what, leadership is to you. And
mhm,
then once you identify that, because some people do identify and say, no, I don't want it. But
yeah.
if if you have that passion, if you feel that's part of your purpose, then move forward.
Yeah.
Like we talked about, this is a new year. And our goal has been as to continue helping people, but we're gonna continue that.
Yeah.
So I just want to give you an opportunity, Dave, to, if you have any final thoughts that you want to leave with our listeners and viewers before we move on.
Yeah, I would put out there that if you're interested in leadership, as Joe mentioned, if you're curious about leadership, explore it. There's plenty of stuff online. There's plenty of people in your networks, personal and professional, that if you really think about it, you'll know who those individuals are. And I would encourage you, and we would encourage you to reach out to them and pick their brains a little bit. Ask them the questions, sit down with them. It kind of gets back to the question, if you could talk to anyone for just an hour, who would it be? You
Right.
know,
Yeah.
the chances are you're going to realize that they possess some leadership skills, and that's why you want to sit down and have that hour conversation with them.
Right.
So explore it. Like we've mentioned, leadership is not for everyone, even though everyone has the potential. And for those who really embrace it, those are the people, the ones that are not in those positions, and even those that are, those are the people that we're trying to touch. If you're curious about it, explore it, because it's as common as it can be. It's also as much uncommon, if that makes any sense.
Right.
So
All right. Well, thanks for those final words, Dave. And I won't, belabor this any longer, but thanks for all the content that you just provided, and that summary. But just like Dave said, I just think, if you are on a path of leadership, and we've talked about this before, it's all about doing the research and
yeah,
finding those things that work for you. Like Dave said, if you get an opportunity to talk to those leaders that you look up to or people that you want to be like, go pick their brains if you
yeah,
get that opportunity, because even though they may give you, again, their whole blueprint, you may only use bits and pieces of it. So if you have the opportunity to speak to more than one leader, that's even better, because
absolutely.
that's what it's all about, is gathering those tools and tips that work for you. Again, we don't expect you to be an exact replica of someone or copy their style or anything like that. We want you to be the best version of you.
Yeah,
And what that takes is you, taking in as much information as you can, to make your own informed decision about whatever your situation. So that's where I'll leave it. It's we all, like they said, all have the potential to be leaders. It's just whether we want to go to that next level and exemplify what that leader is, and play that role. So with that, we want to thank you all again for tuning in and listening to us on this podcast. Like me and Dave always say, we enjoy doing this. So again, if you have any topics you want us to talk about or anything you want us to discuss, please feel free to reach out to us. Our information is, in the description. But with that, we want to thank you all for being, no, I'm sorry. I want to have you all continue being your not so ordinary you.